I stand here as living proof that God never fails. When I was born without arms and without legs, many people thought my life would be a tragedy before it even began. Doctors worried, people whispered, some even questioned where God was. And there were moments when I asked that question myself. I lay in bed at night staring at the ceiling, wondering why I was different, wondering if my life had any value, wondering if God had forgotten me. But today I can tell you with absolute confidence, God never fails. Even when life feels like it's falling apart. Worry has a way of making us feel like we are carrying the weight of the entire world on our shoulders. We worry about our future, our health, our finances, our relationships, and our mistakes. We replay yesterday's pain and fear tomorrow's uncertainty. But worry does not add a single good thing to your life. It only steals your peace. I know what it feels like to worry about whether you will ever be accepted, whether you will ever succeed, whether your life will ever make sense. I worried that no one would love me, that I would be alone forever. But every time I tried to control everything myself, I fell deeper into fear. It was only when I let go and placed my trust in God that my life began to change. You see, faith is not believing that life will be easy. Faith is believing that God is good even when life is hard. There were days when I didn't feel strong. There were days when I felt broken, useless, and overwhelmed. But God was still working even when I couldn't see it. God was still faithful even when I doubted. Some of the greatest miracles happen behind the scenes, in the silence, in the waiting. Just because you don't see God's hand moving doesn't mean He's not at work. Stop worrying about how it will happen. Stop worrying about when it will happen. Stop worrying about whether you're good enough. If God brought you to it, He will bring you through it. I'm standing here today, traveling the world, speaking hope into millions of lives, not because I am strong, but because God is strong. Not because I had all the answers, but because I trusted the one who does. My limitations did not stop God's plan. Your limitations will not stop God's plan either. Sometimes God allows storms, not to destroy us, but to develop us. I didn't ask to be born without arms and legs, but God used what the world called a weakness to show His power. Your pain has a purpose. Your struggle has meaning. Your tears are not wasted. God sees every sleepless night, every silent prayer, every moment when you felt like giving up. And He is saying to you right now, trust me, I've got this. When you leave it in God's hands, you find peace even before the problem is solved. You find strength even when nothing around you changes. Worry says, what if everything goes wrong? Faith says, even if it does, God will not fail me. I have fallen down more times than I can count, literally and emotionally. But every time I fell, God gave me the strength to get back up. And even when I couldn't get up on my own, He carried me. You don't need to have everything figured out. You just need to take the next step in faith. Leave your fears with God. Leave your broken dreams with God. Leave your future with God. He is a God who keeps His promises. He is a God who turns messes into messages and tests into testimonies. If He can use a man with no arms and no legs to inspire the world, imagine what He can do with your life when you stop worrying and start trusting. God never fails, not once, not ever, and He will not start with you. I want you to understand something very deeply today. God has never failed you, even in the moments when you felt abandoned. I know what it's like to feel forgotten. I know what it's like to look at your life and ask, why me? When I was a child, I didn't see purpose. I didn't see hope, and I definitely didn't see a future. I saw my limitations every single day. I saw what I didn't have, what I couldn't do, and what I thought I would never become. And in those moments, it felt like silence from heaven. But silence does not mean absence. God was there even when I couldn't feel Him. We often think God has failed us because life didn't go according to our plan. But what if God is not failing? What if He is building? What if the delay is not denial and the pain is not punishment? I learned that God's faithfulness is not proven by comfort, but by His presence in the struggle. I woke up every day with the same body, the same challenges, the same fears. Yet God was shaping my heart, strengthening my faith, and preparing a future I could not imagine. There were times I cried myself to sleep, times I questioned my worth, times I wondered if my life mattered at all. But looking back, now I can tell you with certainty that every tear had a purpose. God never wastes pain. He uses it to grow us, to humble us, and to position us for something greater. The very thing I thought disqualified me became the platform through which God showed His power. God's faithfulness is not based on how strong you are. It's based on who He is. Even when you feel weak, confused, or broken, God remains unchanging. People may fail you. Circumstances may disappoint you. But God stays the same yesterday, today, and forever. When everything else falls apart, God still stands. And when you look back one day, you will realize that what felt like God failing was actually God carrying you the entire time. Worry is one of the heaviest burdens you will ever carry because it convinces you that you are alone in a battle you were never meant to fight by yourself. I know what it feels like to let fear run wild in your mind. I worried about my future, about being rejected, about never being loved, about whether my life would have any meaning at all. Those thoughts didn't come once in a while, they came every single day. And the more I worried, the smaller my world became. Worry shrinks your vision until all you can see is the problem in front of you. Here is the truth I had to learn the hard way. Worrying does not change tomorrow. It only steals today. It robs you of peace, joy, and strength. When you worry, you are trying to control outcomes that are beyond your control. You replay conversations that already happened and fear scenarios that may never come. I spent years asking, what if? Instead of asking God for peace. And every time I tried to carry the weight alone, I collapsed under it. Letting go of worry does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop pretending you are God. It means you acknowledge your limits and trust His power. There was a moment in my life when I realized I could either live in fear of what might happen or live in faith that God was already working things out. I chose faith not because it was easy, but because worry was destroying me. When you place your worries in God's hands, something incredible happens inside you. The situation may not change immediately, but you do. You begin to breathe again. You begin to hope again. You begin to stand even when life tries to knock you down. Peace doesn't come from having all the answers. It comes from trusting the one who does. Worry tells you everything depends on you. Faith reminds you that God has never failed and He never will. Faith is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to trust God in the presence of fear. I had fear in my life long before I had faith. I was afraid of being rejected, afraid of being alone, afraid that my life would never matter. Every mirror reminded me of what I lacked, and every comparison made me feel smaller. Yet, in the middle of that fear, God was inviting me to trust Him, not with perfect confidence, but with honest surrender. Faith didn't begin for me when my circumstances changed. Faith began when I stopped running from God with my questions and started bringing them to Him. There were moments when I prayed and nothing seemed to happen. No instant miracle. No sudden removal of my struggles. And that's where many people give up. They think faith means immediate results. But real faith is trusting God even when the outcome is uncertain. I learned that God's goodness is not measured by how quickly He fixes things, but by how faithfully He walks with us through them. Even when I felt weak, God was strong. Even when I felt lost, God knew exactly where I was. Fear tells you that you are on your own. Faith reminds you that you are never alone. There comes a moment in life when you realize that holding on is actually what's breaking you. I had to leave. I learned that the hard way. For so long, I tried to control everything, my future, my image, how people saw me, how my life would turn out. I thought if I worried enough, planned enough, tried hard enough, I could protect myself from pain. But all it did was exhaust me. Control gave me the illusion of safety, but it robbed me of peace. Letting go felt terrifying because it meant trusting God with things I cared deeply about. Yet that surrender became the turning point of my life. When you release control, you're not giving up, you're giving it over. You are acknowledging that there is a God who sees what you cannot see and knows what you do not know. I didn't know how my life would ever make sense. I didn't know how I could have purpose with a body like mine. But God knew. And when I stopped demanding answers and started trusting His heart, something shifted inside me. The weight I carried for years began to lift. Not because my problems disappeared, but because I no longer carried them alone. Letting go doesn't mean you won't feel pain anymore. It means pain will no longer define you. It means you stop measuring your life by what you lack and start believing that God is enough. I learned that peace comes when you place your future in God's hands, even when those hands are leading you into uncertainty. Especially then. Some of you are holding on so tightly because you're afraid of what will happen if you let go. But what if letting go is exactly what God is waiting for? What if your breakthrough is on the other side of surrender? God is not asking you to understand everything. He's asking you to trust Him with everything. When you finally release control, you make room for God's strength, God's timing, and God's purpose to unfold in ways you never imagined. Pain has a voice, and if you're not careful, it will try to define who you are. I know that voice very well. It told him I was broken, that my life would always be limited, that my suffering was meaningless. There were moments when the pain felt louder than God's promises, when the struggle felt endless, and when hope seemed like something meant for other people. But over time, I discovered a truth that changed everything. Pain is not the end of your story. It is often the place where God begins His greatest work. I did not choose my pain, but I could choose what I believed about it. I could believe that my suffering was proof that God had abandoned me, or I could believe that God was shaping something inside me that comfort never could. Pain strips away the false foundations we build our lives on and forces us to ask deeper questions about purpose, identity, and faith. It was in my weakest moments that I learned how strong God truly is. When I had nothing left to lean on, I learned how to lean on Him. God does not waste pain. Every cry, every sleepless night, every silent prayer matters. Pain can either make you bitter or make you better. And the difference is what you do with it. When you bring your pain to God instead of hiding it, He transforms it. What once wounded you becomes the very thing that allows you to heal others. My story did not become powerful because I was strong, but because God met me in my brokenness and gave it purpose. Your pain may not make sense right now. You may not see how anything good could come from it, but one day you will look back and realize that what tried to break you actually built you. The scars you carry will not be signs of defeat. They will be evidence of God's faithfulness. Pain does not mean God has failed you. It often means He is preparing you for a purpose far greater than you can imagine. I used to believe that my limitations were the reason my life would never be meaningful. Every day I was reminded of what I couldn't do, where I didn't fit, and how different I was from everyone else. It's easy to look at your weaknesses and assume they disqualify you from greatness. The world tells you that you must be strong, perfect, and complete to matter. But God works in a completely different way. He doesn't wait for you to become strong. He shows His strength right in the middle of your weakness. There were moments when I wished I could trade my body for a normal. I thought if I had what others had, then I could be confident, successful, and happy. But God showed me that my value was never found in what I had or didn't have. My worth came from who created me. My limitations did not surprise God. He knew exactly what He was doing when He made me, and He knows exactly what He's doing with your life too. Your weakness is not an obstacle to God's plan. It is often the platform for it. When people look at my life, they don't see my strength, they see God's grace. If I could do everything on my own, there would be no reason to trust God. But because I can't, His power becomes visible. God loves to take what the world calls impossible and turn it into a testimony. You may feel unqualified, insecure, or inadequate. You may think your past, your failures, or your limitations disqualify you, but God is not looking for perfection. He is looking for surrender. When you offer Him your weakness, He gives you His strength. When you stop hiding what you lack and start trusting who He is, you will discover that God never fails and He never makes mistakes. Hope is not a feeling, it is a choice. I know what it's like to face moments when hope seems impossible. When I was growing up without arms and legs, there were days I didn't want to get out of bed. I couldn't see how my life could matter, how I could ever make a difference, or how anyone could possibly love me. The world looked at me and saw limitations. I looked at myself and saw nothing but obstacles. But God had a different plan. He reminded me that hope is not dependent on what we see. It is dependent on who we trust. You see, hope is what allows us to keep going when circumstances scream at us to quit. It is what keeps you moving forward even when the road is steep and the path is unclear. The moment I chose to hold on to hope, even in the darkest days, everything began to change. I realized that hope does not deny the challenges. It acknowledges them and says, I will trust God anyway. That trust transforms fear into courage and despair into purpose. God never asks us to hope in our own strength because our strength is limited. He asks us to hope in Him because His power is limitless. The very things that feel like setbacks can become the exact tools God uses to shape your character and fulfill your destiny. I couldn't walk. I couldn't run. I couldn't hold a pen the way others could. But God used those very limitations to show the world His power, His love, His faithfulness. No matter how hopeless things may seem right now, hope whispers that God is not finished with your story. Every challenge, every struggle, every tear is part of a bigger plan. When you choose hope, you are choosing to trust that God never fails, that He sees what you cannot see, and that He will turn your difficulties into a testimony that inspires others. Hope is not passive. It is an active declaration that God is bigger than your circumstances and that no matter what, He is faithful. Of the most powerful lessons I have learned in life is that God's timing is perfect, even when it feels painfully slow. I used to want everything to happen on my schedule. I wanted answers when I prayed, solutions when I struggled, and results when I worked hard. I thought if I could just push hard enough, plan well enough, and control enough, I could make my life work. But life has a way of showing us that God's timing is not our timing, and that His plan is far greater than anything we could arrange for ourselves. I learned that patience is not simply waiting. It is trusting, believing, and surrendering while you wait. There were many moments when I felt stuck, overlooked, or forgotten. Doors I prayed would open remained closed, and opportunities I longed for seemed delayed. It was easy to feel discouraged and to think that God had failed me. But I discovered that every delay, every closed door, every no I received was actually God's way of preparing me for something bigger. Sometimes we are in the waiting room, not because God isn't listening, but because He is lining up something better than we can imagine. Waiting is not wasted time. It is the place where character is built, faith is strengthened, and reliance on God becomes real. I had to learn to stop focusing on the clock and start focusing on God. Even when I couldn't see the bigger picture, He could. Even when I was frustrated, He was working. God never forgets His promises. He never overlooks your prayers. He never fails to act at the right moment. The challenge is to trust Him fully while He works behind the scenes. When you do, you will look back one day and realize that every delay was a divine setup, every setback a stepping stone, and every moment of waiting a lesson in God's perfect faithfulness. There is a truth I want you to hear today, and it is one that has changed my life completely. God's plan for you is bigger than your mistakes, bigger than your failures, and bigger than your fears. I know what it's like to feel unworthy, to look at your life and think, I've messed up too much, or I'm too broken for anyone to use me. I felt that way for years, believing that my past or my limitations define me. But God has a way of taking what we consider worthless and turning it into something extraordinary. Your life is not over because of your setbacks. It is just beginning in the hands of a God who never fails. I want you to realize that God's power is made perfect in our weakness. When I could not stand on my own, God lifted me. When I could not walk or hold, God showed His strength through me. He does not look for the capable. He looks for the willing. He does not call the perfect. He calls those who trust Him. Every challenge, every obstacle, every moment of doubt is an opportunity for God to display His faithfulness. The very things you think disqualify you from purpose can actually become the platform for your testimony. Many people live their lives trying to control every outcome, trying to fix what is broken on their own, and in the process, they miss God's plan. You cannot manufacture God's blessings, and you cannot force His timing. But when you surrender your fears, your past, and your limitations to Him, you open the door for miracles. I am living proof that what seems impossible to man is possible with God. No matter how dark your circumstances, no matter how impossible your situation may seem, God has not forgotten you. He is not late, He is not careless, and He will never fail. Trust Him, and watch Him turn your life into a story that inspires hope, faith, and courage in others. One of the greatest lessons I've learned is that surrendering to God does not make you weak, it makes you free. For years, I tried to control every part of my life, my future, my relationships, my purpose. And all it did was leave me exhausted and defeated. I thought that if I could just figure everything out, I would finally have peace. But true peace does not come from control, it comes from trust. It comes from placing your life, your fears, and your dreams in the hands of a God who never fails. The moment I let go, I discovered that I was carrying less than I had imagined, and God was carrying so much more than I could see. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring about your life or your future. It means you stop believing that you have to make everything happen by yourself. God is asking you to release your grip on the outcomes and allow Him to guide your steps. I had to learn that the times I felt most powerless were the exact moments God was showing His strength. Every limitation I faced, every obstacle I couldn't overcome became a stage for God's power to shine. When I surrendered my fears, He replaced them with courage. When I surrendered my doubts, He filled me with faith. When I surrendered my weakness, He revealed His strength. The world tells you that independence is the goal, that you must rely on yourself to succeed. But God's plan is far greater than self-reliance. It is reliance on His faithfulness. The more I trusted Him, the more I realized that worry, fear, and stress lose their power. God has a purpose for your life, a plan that cannot fail, and a love that never abandons. When you let go and leave it all to Him, you'll experience a freedom, a peace, and a joy that the world cannot give. You will walk in confidence knowing that God's hand is guiding you every step of the way, and no matter what happens, He will never fail.